Welcome back to the Morph Your Mind podcast. I am your host, Justin Wright. My co-host, Chrissy Barron, will be here in a little bit. And before we get started, as always, I have to thank our title sponsor, Nova 3 Labs. We have a discount code for you guys, and that is podcast15, podcast the number 15. And if you use that at nova3labs.com, you can save yourself some dough on some of the best performance and recovery supplements on the market, things that help with adrenal fatigue, quality of sleep, that help you recover from workouts. Check them out. Use that code to save some cash. And this week, we are talking about a potentially controversial topic. And what I want you to understand as we get started here is that it is your fault. And that is exactly what we're talking about today, how things are your fault, and specifically in relation to solving problems and solving issues in your life. So let's take a look at standard office gossip or people complaining about other things that they encounter. A lot of people complain on a daily basis about things in their life that they do not like, things that they are upset about, things that bother them, people who annoy them or aggravate them. But there's one thing that almost always follows complaining, and that is lack of action. And so you'll see a lot of these people, and they'll gossip and they'll complain and they'll tell stories about, so-and-so did this or did that and how it bothers them and how can they do these types of things. And they complain about the situation, or they complain about the work environment, or they complain about a number of things or a slew of things. But I want you to pay attention to how often those people take action, how often those people turn around and try to do something to improve the situation that they're spending time, energy, and effort complaining about. And what I think you'll find is 9 times out of 10, or even 9.9 times out of 10, those people do nothing. And so they talk, they complain, they get upset, they get frustrated, they let a situation negatively affect their mood, and then they negatively affect the moods of others as they talk about these things, but they never propose a solution, they never try to do anything to fix it. And this can also happen when you're giving constructive criticism to people. Let's say that somebody under your command, or someone who you work closely with or in your life in some other capacity, let's say that they make a mistake and they mess something up. And a lot of times we approach that person and we try to give feedback, or we say, next time you can do this better. And most of the time, if we're being honest, when feedback is given, it's given poorly. It's not given in a way that is actionable. It doesn't motivate or inspire that person to improve the next time around. Most people kind of use power and abuse their power, and when they're giving feedback on a situation, they do so with the same negative undertones as if they were complaining about something happening in their life. And so the goal of this podcast is for you to flip the script, to turn that on its head, and for you to actually understand that it is your fault if you are upset about the way that things are happening in your life, and it's your fault if people are not doing a better job when you try to coach and correct them. And so what we need to understand how to do is we need to understand how to take ownership, how to take action, and we need to understand how to deliver feedback in a collaborative manner. And these are all aspects of this same topic. And so first and foremost, if there's something in your life that you do not like, if there's an environment you're in that bothers you or frustrates you, if there's somebody around who aggravates you, you need to take ownership for fixing that thing, or at least take responsibility for starting to find a solution to that problem. And I know a lot of people who are listening to this podcast likely come from the fitness community, or your other coaches who listen to us for we talk about fitness, we talk about coaching clients and that experience. But I see this with coaches quite often. There are always members at every facility who annoy the coaches, who are annoying and obnoxious to deal with. And if you think that that is impossible, then chances are you are one of those obnoxious members. But in all seriousness, these people tend to aggravate coaches because they're difficult to work with, or they consistently do things wrong. There are a lot of people who are not natural athletes. They have very low kinesthetic awareness, meaning they don't have a good understanding of their body or how it moves. And you'll see a lot of coaches, especially coaches earlier in their career, get frustrated with people like this because they're moving poorly and they don't seem to learn anything that you teach them. And when I'm dealing with coaches who experience these frustrations, a lot of times I ask them what they've done to remedy the situation. What have you done to fix that person or help that person get better? And a lot of times the answer is not much. They approach that client or that individual the same way that they would approach a more gifted athlete or a more talented individual who, gets things quicker, who learns things at a faster rate. And when this individual is slow to learn, they get frustrated with that individual. Now, take this out of the coaching world and look at classrooms across America. How many teachers, especially in school districts where students perform poorly on standardized tests, where they have trouble getting accepted to universities, there are a lot of schools that have broken systems right now where teachers are getting frustrated with students for their inability to learn instead of changing the approach or changing the way that they teach. And so if you're encountering somebody who is just not getting it or not getting the point you're trying to make, whether you're a coach, whether you're a teacher, whether you're just trying to instruct somebody, a coworker in the workplace, or even teach somebody in your family or one of your friends how to do something, if they're consistently not getting it and you're getting frustrated at them for that, you need to look internally at your approach. The approach is not working. And so instead of getting frustrated and complaining and getting angry, we need to take responsibility for finding a solution to that problem. And this is universal for all problems, for all issues that we encounter. It falls on us to take the responsibility for making that situation better. If something's bothering us, most of the time, we have the ability and we have the skill set to at least start working towards a solution to that problem. So we may not be able to fix things right away, but if we sit there and say, you know what, it's on me, I need to actually try to make the situation better. Instead of getting aggravated with this person who's not learning what I'm trying to teach them, I need to change my approach. I need to do something different. Because if I keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, then this person's going to continue not to learn. And at that point, that's my fault. That's my responsibility. I've tried to use the same approach. They're not getting it. If I just keep doing the same thing over and over again, neither of us are going to get anywhere. The situation is not going to improve. So anytime you find something that's frustrating you in life, I want you to try to find ways that you can take ownership for the solution. And you may not be able to carry it to the finish line. It might not be a problem that you can fully solve on your own. But if you take initiative and you actually try to work towards a solution, or at least suggest ways that you can work towards a solution instead of just complaining about what's negative, that will rub off on people. In the same way that complaints are contagious, when you see a bunch of people complaining, they get in a group and then people start agreeing with each other, and that's how gossip happens, right? Somebody's being negative or complaining about somebody else or something, and then suddenly there's a ripple effect of other people doing the same thing. But the inverse is also true. If you start to try to find a solution, if you start talking about, okay, how can we approach this problem? How can we collectively find a solution to what's going on? If you start to take a positive approach and you take an approach that is geared towards fixing the problem instead of talking about it, that is also contagious. People will also latch on to that. And so if you can start that movement, if you can get things moving in that direction, you will find that you have assistance from others, that other people also want to help find a solution. But it has to start with somebody. It has to start with one person taking ownership and saying, instead of complaining, I'm going to try to do something to fix this. And when we shift this to a leadership position, or when we're talking about teams or teamwork, the same thing is also true, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, when we're giving criticism of somebody else's performance. So if there is a failure, or if something does not work out the way that it's intended, we very quickly tend to blame others, or we push the blame on others, and we try to make justifications for why we're not directly responsible for that mistake or for that failure. And this is our ego talking, right? Our ego does not want to be wrong. We always get on the defensive when somebody questions our motives, or questions our intent, or questions our beliefs. And so our ego is preventing us in many instances from working together to solve a problem collectively. And when we're talking about teams or organizations, if you're in a business, if you're starting your own business, if you're on a sports team, or you're working with other people in some capacity, which is going to happen often in life, we need to take a collaborative approach. And so if somebody makes a mistake or does something the wrong way, instead of complaining about that performance or shifting blame to that individual, in order to focus on a solution, in order to fix that problem, what we need to do is we need to approach it from a collaborative sense. So many of you may be familiar with Jocko Willink. I've talked about him before, but he recently addressed this topic of collaboration when we give feedback. So when you give feedback to somebody, instead of just approaching them and saying, hey, I don't think you did this the right way, we need to do this or change this piece or approach it this way, take responsibility for the mistake, even if it wasn't yours. Say, how can I help you better the next time around? How can we work together to make sure that we fix this problem moving forward? What can I do that will make your life easier? Or what can I do to assist you? So now you're calling out the fact that there was a mistake, but instead of shifting blame to the other individual, you're actually putting it on yourself. You're owning that solution and saying, what can I do to make this better? How can I contribute more positively to this team? How can I contribute to finding a solution? And if you start to take that approach, the mindset of owning the failures just as much as owning the successes, owning the problem instead of just complaining about the problem. If you start to take that ownership, whether we're talking about a general sense, whether we're talking about a collaborative sense, you're going to find that most of the time you have the ability to directly impact the problems or the negative things that are happening in your life that are bothering you right now. If you can just step up and own the solution or own finding the solution instead of sitting there and complaining and gossiping, if you can take responsibility and ask yourself, what if this whole situation is my fault? What if my lack of action is furthering this problem? If you can put that on yourself, if you can put that question on yourself, then what you will find is you're able to find those solutions, and those things that are bothering you will start to fade away. And there will always be pieces or things or people who will frustrate you, and that's never going to change. But if you start to take responsibility for solving the problems that you have the ability to solve, if you start stepping up and owning those solutions and pushing people around you to collaborate and work towards that solution, then I think you're going to find that your happiness increases and your quality of life increases, and it's also going to dramatically increase your ability to work well with others in your life in whatever capacities that you need to collaborate, whether that's from a sports team or athletic team, whether that's in the workplace, whether you are doing this in a business or some other team at work, even with your friends and family. It's going to increase your ability to work well with those people and actually start solving problems instead of just sitting there frustrated, angry, and complaining like the majority of people in the world.